Tonight we take a look at the Good Samaritan law, but there isn't a law. The law expired. Welcome in. And now everyone's trying to cover themselves in a situation which puts a lot of people with drug addictions in a difficult space. And those who surround them in provocative environments may not make that 911 call when it's necessary. Anyway, we'll talk about that tonight with our guests. In fact, I think there's a lot to talk about with this. I'm not sure we're going to get it all done in one show, but we'll see how it goes. Welcome in to my state of mind. How about that 4th of July weekend? Whew. You know, this is always a funny week because a lot of people just keep staying on vacation because they figure, heck, you know, 4th of July rolls in. Monday's a tough day to recover anyway. I kind of noticed it on the radio today. People were kind of, you know, weighing in on the issues. But it's a pleasure to be with you. And by the way, tonight we're on Fox Providence, and for the foreseeable future, you'll have three opportunities. You'll now have three opportunities to see this show: 7:30 and 11:30 on MyRI TV, and midnight on Fox Providence. Let us check the rundown for the issues of the day before we talk to our guests, and we have plenty. Yeah, they set a new world record, sort of. Maybe not world record, but almost. Here's the headline: World Cup, Wonder Women, fantastic. I mean, what, 3 goals in about, I don't know, 10 minutes? Now, I didn't see this thing live. I went to the fireworks at Bryant last night, which were phenomenal, with the Navy band. And the Navy officer who made this compelling presentation about Old Glory punctuates it by saying, and oh, by the way, the U.S. women won the World Cup. How about a spoiler alert? You know, I got my DVR running on this thing, so I got home and I watched it, and they just drilled Japan. It was over before it started. It felt like. Here's the thing: not only is it a World Cup victory, but it's a ratings victory. Take a look at this.
Team USA MVP Carly Lloyd says she hasn't slept a wink since the U.S. women's soccer team won the World Cup in spectacular fashion.
Our team is just super proud. You know, it took all 23 players to get this done.
The U.S. had 4 goals in the first 16 minutes of the final against Japan. As the match neared the end, Lloyd gave her captain armband to 35-year-old forward Abby Wambach. The former FIFA Player of the Year has said this will be her last World Cup. The win is sweet revenge for the U.S. team who lost to Japan in the 2011 final.
Now, it depends on who you talk to or what rating service or what reports that come out, but there's no doubt that this was a record rating for the U.S. Women's World Cup, and it was comparable to a Game 7 World Series last year, right there at the same number. A very, very, very big victory, not only for the U.S. women's team, but for women's sports in general in prime time on Fox. And of course, Fox was a big winner there. So I think we've come to a place where women's sports have no longer have to prove themselves. Well, my point is they don't have to prove themselves anymore. The only thing that's weird about this is the money. The monetization of men's sports is still very high. The monetization of women's sports is still very low. But other than that, the acceptance and the interest, very high. I'm glad I can spit that one out. It was a long weekend. Sorry about that. Anyway, good stuff. No means what? I don't know what no means. Do you know what no means? Here's the headline from Greece. It's kind of hard to figure out what the heck no means. Maybe CBS can figure it out in 30 seconds.
Greeks lined up at ATMs again Monday morning, hoping to withdraw their daily limit of cash. The Greek government ordered the banks remain closed out of fears the country will run out of money. 61% of Greeks voted no to a bailout from European Union members Sunday. The country would have received an $8 billion bailout. In exchange, Greece's foreign creditors wanted steep tax hikes and cuts to pensions and public spending. The vote was seen as a victory for Prime Minister Alexis Tsipras, who said the no vote would give him more leverage to negotiate a better deal, which would include keeping the country in the euro.
Yeah, and I don't know what that's going to mean. Loan forgiveness, all sorts of things. Look, the argument is that they feel, the preponderance of the people there feel like they can't cut their way to any kind of comeback. Well, their own pensions and their own wallets were on the line. What did you expect them to do in this vote, right? There's going to be some tough decisions made by the rest of Europe and the financial world there, and we'll keep in touch with that over the course of the week, because Tomorrow is kind of like a tension convention that way. All right, next item, the church vandalism story. Anytime this happens, for some reason it gets into the news. The headline here from WPRI.com, it's just not right. The Holy Rosary Church over there by 195 Fox Point. Here's Eyewitness News coverage of it.
As parishioners of Our Lady of the Rosary walked up to the church Sunday, almost every conversation was about the vandalism.
Everybody is talking about it. Everybody is sad. Some parishioners were crying. I mean, it's a sad day.
Eyewitness News was inside the church Saturday night as detectives photographed damage and dusted for fingerprints. Rosaries were stolen from statues, a rhinestone shoved into the nose of the suffering Christ, and the smaller of two pulpits reduced to broken pieces of stone.
In a matter of justice, I also want him to get caught because there is a matter of justice to be dealt with. I mean, he destroyed sacred property. That can't be excused.
It's not only, a violation of who we are as a people of faith, but certainly, a slap in the face of God.
Now look, it doesn't get to Charleston level, right? We shouldn't compare it that way, even though these are church stories. Vandalism is a problem, and here's what worries me. We do stories about this stuff, and we pay a lot of attention to it, which is exactly what a vandal wants, right? Why does somebody commit some kind of vandalism crime? Because they want attention, and we seem to give it to them. Hopefully, though, the attention will lead to the suspect, which in the end might make it all better. I don't know. When we look at what the General Assembly does sometimes, you just got to shake your head. Providence Journal headline, only 17 this time around because it's not an election year, but they passed on their 1.6% raises. 1.6% raises, $242.70 is the value of that raise against their $15,000 ballpark part-time salary. It's a constitutional provision. It's now tied to a United States government calculation. They took the politics out of this a long, long time ago. And so here's a memo to the 17 people who are looking to score some political points with their moron constituents, who I hope aren't morons. They think they're morons. I hope they're not morons. I hope you're not a moron. I hope you're not moved by this, oh, I've decided that it's not appropriate. Like Jim Sheehan, the state senator, who says, I don't think it's appropriate in principle to accept a pay raise when sacrifices are being made all across state government and in most households in our state. Well, you know what? It ain't Greece. And the reason that this calculation is made constitutionally for your pay, up or down, is because it's supposed to take the politics out of it. So when you take a pay decrease or you don't take the constitutionally established raise, you are playing politics with it. And people are not morons. They are not stupid. Rory, not so smart. The Open's coming up next week, and he's out. Headline, look at this. The #1 golfer in the world playing soccer with his fellas and comes up looking like that. Now look, you got to be careful. This weekend, I was playing wiffle ball in the backyard with the family. I hyperextended my knee. Just do what you're supposed to do, Rory. And me? Your state of mind, I don't know if I hyperextended or not. It just hurts. 228-1886. What am I diagnosing myself now? State of mind at myritv.com is the email. You can Facebook post, you can tweet. Michaela posts on Facebook the following. Thank you, Dan, for standing up for all the great priests in our community. Well, that must be a reference to our discussions about same-sex marriage and some of the charges against the Bishop Tobin, for him applauding those who are conscientious objectors and the like. Look, Catholic Church is taking a lot of hits lately. Somebody's got to say something good about it sometime. All right. Next, when we come back, we'll take a hard look at this amnesty thing. It's not a pretty picture right now. Stay with us. So, the General Assembly adjourns, and someone say it's good that they do less rather than more. But this one, I'm not so sure was a good move. Here's the headline. And no, that's not the one we were looking for. We'll come back to that one, Laura. The other one, thank you. Raimondo joins you know what? We're just having one of those days today. It's after a 3-day holiday. What are you going to do? Raimondo joins push to reinstate the Good Samaritan law, which I thought was kind of interesting. We'll show the governor a little bit later on. She kind of crashed the party at the rally the other day, and our guests, I'm sure, were probably happy about that. Were you happy about that? Were you?
I think so. I think that it showed that lawmakers are listening.
Well, they didn't listen enough to give you a law, did they?
No, they didn't.
All right, Rebecca and Michelle have been guests here before. Michelle McKenzie is a researcher who, working on preventing overdose and naloxone intervention. We've had good conversations about this before, and Rebecca is the executive director of Protect Families First. Before we get to the rally and the politics and all this, what is the essential problem? I want to start with you. What is the essential problem here?
Well, Rhode
We have
Island.
a law that's expired.
Right. So we're in the midst of an opioid epidemic, addiction epidemic, and as a result of that, Rhode Island and the rest of the country is experiencing many overdose deaths.
Explain what an opioid is for everybody.
It is pain relievers, prescription pain relievers, and heroin. That's what opioids are.
Okay.
And the Good Samaritan provided a couple of protections. It was instated in 2012, and it expired at the end of June. It protected people if they used naloxone to save a life from either criminal or civil liability. So people felt comfortable seeking out naloxone and carrying it. And we actually know that that aspect of the law has been well absorbed by our citizenry because over 2,500 Rhode Islanders since 2014 have actually been distributed naloxone so that they could save a life.
Okay.
The second piece of the law protected people who called 911 and also the victim of the overdose from prosecution for possession. And that meant that if there happened to be drugs on site, and it was a small amount of drugs, that the people couldn't be prosecuted when the police came in. So as a result of that, at first there were still some arrests whenever as police became used to the law, but basically people also, there was no prosecution, there were fewer arrests around possession if the police came in as a result of a 911 call.
So now we have no law.
Exactly.
But we have a memo. Now you can use that headline if you can, Laura. We have a memo from the Attorney General that says the following. We have that. There you go. He's concerned. He wants the police now to refer all cases to his office. I guess before what? He busts anybody? The heroin epidemic and the loss of lives experienced by too many families in our state is of utmost concern, and I certainly implore anyone involved in a drug-related emergency to seek medical assistance no matter the consequences. Easy to say.
It's easy to say. I mean, I think that the reality is people panic, and it's hard enough to, in an emergency situation, get people to think straight, let alone remember the laws and their protections and what to do, and be encouraged to call 911. I think that, yeah, it's easier said than done to say, no matter the consequences, seek medical assistance, because we know what the consequences are without this law, that people are arrested, people are incarcerated. So I really think it's unfair for the Attorney General to give people the choice between saving a life or losing their freedom.
Well, who held this thing up? You follow the politics of this thing. Is it the Attorney General that held this thing up?
So I think that a significant portion
Everyone
of the blame
seemed to want to fix it, and
Yes.
nobody fixed it.
exactly,
Yes.
and I
Or
think
extended the law. It was because they had a moratorium on it.
Correct.
Yep, it had a sunset, and I do think the Attorney General deserves a lion's share of this because when legislation was introduced in both chambers, the Senate and the House, there was identical legislation, and then around April, the Attorney General inserted a letter submitted a letter to the House and said, we don't like these extra provisions. The extra provisions that we were pushing for, along with extending the law beyond July 1st of this year to remove the sunset, was to extend the protections to people on parole and probation, one of the highest at-risk demographics for overdose. But also it was to expand some of the charges because under the law there's a very, very fine line to navigate between possession and possession with intent to sell, for example, right? If you just have 2 bags, that could look like intent to sell, even though it was one person's and the other's. So in an emergency situation, from a public health perspective, the best public health messages are very clear, very concise, and direct. call 911, wear a seatbelt, don't smoke, use sunscreen. Those are all good public health messages because they're clear. When we go out in the field and tell people to call 911, it's very difficult to say, call 911 if da-da-da-da-da, but you aren't protected for these charges and you are protected for these charges. We're working with people who may not have that much legal vocabulary to even begin with, let alone at the scene of an emergency. I think it's really hard to kind of sort through your mind what is protected and what isn't. So what we wanted was a very clear law that just said, call 911 and you will be protected. And the Attorney General went in, inserted an amendment, and then we had bills that didn't match on either chamber.
Right, and his amendment was?
His amendment was to remove the extended protections and to just extend the sunset until 2017, which is a whole nother issue of this sunset that we keep seeing being put in place because well, for one, as we saw with our legislators this year, they weren't up to the job when it came time to renew the law.
Yeah.
So I'm afraid in 2017 something similar could happen.
Okay, hold on. You know, what I'd like to do, we're going to have our guests in this segment and next segment come back for a program later in this week on Friday to kind of extrapolate a little bit. But the moral of the story right now is what? Where are we?
We have to get a Good Samaritan law back in place. Because we know that we are losing as many lives in 2015 as we lost at this time in 2014, that I'm afraid we're allowing the Attorney General to direct public health policy, and that's a scary thing. He has a lot of expertise, but it's not in public health policy.
All right, when we come back, we're going to meet a couple of gentlemen who understand what it's like there in the real world. Stay with us.
Good Samaritan laws do save lives. Good Samaritan laws have saved lives and do save lives, and it is frustrating and disappointing that the General Assembly left this building in this session without addressing this issue. And this is, it's an unacceptable situation, and I urge the General Assembly to reinstate these protections as quickly as they're able to.
You know, some people say better late than never. You know, if the governor wanted that bill to be worked on, she should have said so while the General Assembly was in session. You know, crashing into the party at the State House is oh so convenient, but perhaps it will be catalytic to something happening ASAP in the fall. Jonathan is a recovering user. What's the proper term?
A person in long-term recovery.
A person in long-term recovery. Congratulations on that.
Thank
Keep
you.
up the good work. And Ray, you've been working in this field for a long time, correct?
For about 10 years.
All right. So as somebody who's dealt with this challenge, what is the current state of affairs? Not having a 911 amnesty law on the books because it expired and was not renewed means what to you?
Well, I conduct a lot of street outreach and distribute a lot of Narcan in the community. And from what I hear and from my own personal experience, a lot of people, they're in fear of being incarcerated. And that fear of being incarcerated will prevent them from calling 911, which you can't blame them.
Well, when the law was active, and it was a multi-year law, right? A couple, 3-year law that just expired. Were people on the street aware of there was no law, then there was a law, but it had an expiration date. Now there's are they checked into the play-by-play of this?
They are, particularly. I mean, Ray and I deal with the street-based population primarily, who maybe don't watch the news or follow the politics of it.
Sure, right.
And it's people like us that go out on the street and make them aware of what the situation is.
Okay.
And help them to understand why it's important that they call 911 and let them know that they're safe when they do so.
So what's that like working in the community and relaying this political information to everybody?
It's easier than people might think. I mean, our population is aware that these deaths are going on, that people are overdosing, and they try to make an effort to know how to prevent these overdoses. And I think having that law, having them be able to call 911 is another tool that we can use, and definitely vital for the community.
So what are you saying on the street during this limbo period? I mean, everyone has the intent to do the right thing. The Attorney General is like, oh no, I'm going to write a memo. Hey, cops, don't bust anybody. Refer everything to us. Or what are you saying so that your credibility with your outreach work remains intact? What are you saying?
Well, first and foremost, to let them know their voices are not, they're not silent, that they're out there and they can be heard. Second thing,
Meaning what?
Meaning that talk to their representatives if they know who their representatives
that
are.
part, okay.
Talk to the lawmakers, let them know, this is going down. And also, still call 911. There is always going to be that fear, but having them maybe hide their drugs, stash them somewhere else. I live in a real world. People do real things, trying to save lives out here.
So you go from, so you're making a little bit of a tactical transition, trying to explain to people that may want to hide their stuff when there's a...
At the end of the day,
That's
there's a life at stake. Calling 911 could be that difference between a person dying or somebody going to jail. I mean, it's that simple.
Are you worried that cognitive decision making is going to get all messed up here?
How so?
I mean, that people aren't going to. I mean, there's as Rebecca was saying in the prior segment, there's a lot going on when someone's in trouble, man. I mean, it's not like you're okay. Let me go down the checklist. Let me evaluate
That's all
this.
happens in a matter of.
Ray told me maybe I should hide my drugs before I mean, this is. Some people just might bail and leave somebody in distress.
Well, they could. They absolutely could.
And it probably will happen.
And if nothing else, even if they have the willingness to call 911 and then go out the back door, so to speak, that might not be good enough. That couple of minutes that the ambulance is en route to try to locate that person by having the person that called not stay with the victim of the overdose, that few minutes could make the difference of a life.
So what are you going to do during the interim here?
What can we do? We're going to keep doing what we do. We distribute Narcan in collaboration with Miriam Hospital's Pony program, and help to continue to educate people on how to prevent an overdose.
I think it's important. Listen, we only have a couple of minutes left in this segment and in the program. I'm going to invite these gentlemen and our previous guests back. We can keep them around today, and you'll see them on Friday. But I think a more comprehensive conversation has to be had here and reminded. We've talked about this before. There are all sorts of stereotypical things going on with these overdose cases. The people who are becoming overdosed on these opioids are not necessarily who you think they are by some kind of stereotypical idea. You have a life story yourself you want to tell, so I'd ask you to come back for our Friday show. What message do you want to send, though, for people watching right now about this legislation and how desperately you think it's needed?
Well, that's it. It's desperately needed. And, I mean, it saves lives. There's no doubt about it.
And for the people who say, hey, you know what, you screw up, you take drugs, you put yourself in jeopardy, you're all jammed up, you need a good Samaritan law, you should have thought better in the first place, blah, 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 blah.
I could say some things, it wouldn't be appropriate for TV.
Abridge it. I mean, give me an edit. I mean, what's drawn? Believe me,
I mean,
there are people watching the show thinking that. You know that.
Everybody has vices. Vices of some sort. You're addicted to donuts. You like coffee in the morning. Whatever it is. These people's vices shouldn't cost somebody their life, especially if we have tools intact that will prevent them from dying.
And also, these are our family members, our mothers, our fathers, our kids, our neighbors, our students. This affects everybody. The disease of addiction doesn't discriminate against any particular person. So these aren't some throwaway street-level prostitute junkies. These are our families. This is our community.
All right. We'll talk more about the politics and the personal stories on this later in the week. Stick around for that, okay? Thanks, guys. We'll come right back. You know what? Why wait to Friday? We'll continue this conversation tomorrow because it only makes sense that you follow the bouncing ball. This 3-day weekend just blew me away. I can't do that stuff anymore. All the stuff you do on the 4th of July weekend. More on this important conversation tomorrow.